Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. So today is the first video of 2022 and here's to many more episodes to come. Today's case we're covering is Louise Porton and viewer discretion is always advised. But before we jump into that, I just want to quickly say a little bit about NordVPN. The reason why I use NordVPN is for safety online for obvious reasons, for myself and for my family. And NordVPN is a virtual private networking service. It hides your IP address and provides you with another IP address so you're always safe online. It then encrypts all of your information and scrambles it up so people like hackers and the government just can't read your information. The reason why I love NordVPN is because they never track, trace, or collect or even sell any of your information. So you know you're always safe with NordVPN. If you would like to be safe with NordVPN, just go online and type in nordvpn.com/stolen for me. And then by using my code stolen for me, you will receive a huge discount on a 2-year plan. Another reason I love them is because I can log in on my computer at a touch of a button and using one of their servers, which is able to be logged in 60 different countries. That means I can access content from that country I log into. And I obviously log into America and use American Netflix a lot because it's much better than the UK's Netflix, in my opinion. So my son does that as well. But wherever you log in at a touch of a button, it will find the fastest server for you, and then you can access content from that country. So if you would like to access NordVPN, then do so by going online at nordvpn.com/stolen for me. And then by using my code stolen for me, you will receive a huge discount on a 2-year plan. Not only do you save a lot of money by signing in and using my code, you also support my channel by doing so. So I just want to say thank you very much up front. Let's jump into today's episode. So, 23-year-old Louise Porton became pregnant with her first child when she was just 18 years old by her then boyfriend, Chris Draper. They named their first daughter Lexi Draper, and not much is really known about their relationship or why it even ended, other than Louise left Chris and moved from Warsaw to Rugby with her daughter Lexi. Now, at the time, she was actually pregnant with her second daughter. But I don't know if Chris actually knew right there and then if Louise was pregnant or not. Louise is said to have stayed with her sister for a little while and then she had temporary accommodation to go to. She was under social services and the housing office, who later found her somewhere to live. When Louise arrived in Rugby, she did meet another man and begin a relationship with him. She then gave birth to her second daughter and named her Scarlett. Scarlett took on the surname Vaughan after her then boyfriend. But it was found out that even though she told Chris that he wasn't the father of Scarlett, it was found out that he actually was. And Louise stopped Chris from seeing Lexi, and he never actually got to meet Scarlett at all. She did say that he didn't pay maintenance and that's why he stopped seeing the kids. But I'm really unsure because there is nothing on their relationship at all to find out. So I can't give you that information. I'm really sorry. I believe that Louise spent most of her time single because the relationship with the man that she met in Rugby, I don't think that lasted very long because there's nothing on him either. It's really apparent to me that being a mum to Louise just wasn't on her list to do. She she loved socializing, she loved clubbing, she loved the attention of men, and she most of all loved money. Now that doesn't make her a bad mum. Her actions made her a bad mum. It is said that Louise's dad used to come down every weekend and babysit for the girls so Louise could go out clubbing and whatever. And this was every weekend, it said. She also worked as a part-time model, but this was more sexual fetishes than modelling like we would think of modelling. Louise also earned money sending explicit photographs to whoever wanted them, and in return they would send her a payment for them. She also worked as a sex worker to bring in money. It is said that Louise's sister and mum Sharon would regularly help out Louise with her children a lot. And it's also believed that growing up, Sharon wasn't present a lot of the time in her children's lives for one reason or another. Louise was close to her grandma, or so it seems. She used to spend a lot of time with her grandma. But according to Louise's cousin, it wasn't because she loved her and wanted to naturally just spend time with her grandma. It was because her grandma would give her money, and this would draw Louise in to see her. And this proves that by when her grandma became so sick she was dying, Louise didn't even bother going to visit her. And she didn't even turn up at her funeral, which goes to show she only cared about you seeing her because of the money. The same cousin always said that Louise, as a child, was really spiteful and she used to hurt her on occasions. And she described Louise as very manipulative. But she said that Louise didn't get into trouble when she was young, only when she was 15, and that was once for wasting police time. And she just received a caution for this, which is a warning. We're jumping forward now to the 2nd of January 2018. 3-year-old Lexi became ill. Now, Louise called emergency services and an ambulance was going to be dispatched for Lexi. But Louise decided to call the ambulance service back and say, I want to cancel the ambulance and my dad has just turned up and I want to take my daughter to the hospital instead. Lexi arrived at the hospital and she did stay there for a short time and then she was discharged the following day. Then on the 4th of January, Lexi became unwell again and she'd been having fits this time. Her breathing became erratic again and Louise called an ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, they found Lexi laying on the floor on her back and she was unconscious. Lexi had been sick several times all over the place. She was rushed to hospital, obviously, and they had to resuscitate Lexi. She was kept into hospital for a few days and the doctors monitored her to make sure that she was okay. But after a few days of spending time in hospital, the doctors just come to the conclusion that she had a chest infection and she was discharged into the care of Louise with some antibiotics. We then move forward to the 14th of January. Louise is seen entering her building where she was staying with her 2 daughters. So 3-year-old Lexi was walking in the doorway and Scarlett, who was 17 months at the time, was walking in as well. Everything seemed fine on the picture. They were just walking normally and Louise was walking behind him and they were heading into the building. And Louise, she hadn't made any more calls to emergency services since Lexi was discharged from hospital, which is great. So everything seems fine. That was until the early hours of the following day, on the 15th of January. Louise heard on a 999 call saying that her daughter Lexi wasn't breathing. The call handler then reassures Louise, saying that an ambulance is now on its way. The call handler also asked Louise to perform CPR on Lexi until the ambulance arrived. Lexi was then taken to the hospital, but sadly, 3-year-old Lexi had died. As you can imagine, for any good parent, this would have been the worst time of your life. And for Louise, she had to look after her 17-month-old daughter, Scarlett, now, and deal with her daughter dying, which would have been, I don't even know how you would process that. We're going to jump to the 1st of February, and Louise had to make another call to emergency services. But this time it was 17-month-old Scarlett who was unwell. The call handler said that they would dispatch an ambulance, but Louise said that she couldn't wait and she was going to bring her daughter herself because obviously she'd just lost one child. Louise then set off to take Scarlett to the hospital after she had fallen ill. And on her way to the hospital, she stopped and pulled over into Elliott's Retail Park. Louise then called for an ambulance and explained to the call handler that her daughter was asleep on the backseat of her car after becoming really unwell and she was worried. An ambulance was dispatched to the retail park and Scarlett was then taken to the hospital. And sadly, Scarlett was pronounced dead on arrival as well. Now, after Louise's second child had died, things just didn't add up. Not only because her behaviour, because obviously people do deal with grief in a different way, and this was a huge thing to go through. But both her children had just died, and it's unknown why. After Lexi's death, because she was under the age of 18, this automatically triggered an alert for the SUDIC team to form. SUDIC stand for Sudden Death in Childhood. So that's anybody under the age of 18, I believe, as if they die unexpected within 24 hours. This creates an alert, and then various different agencies will come together, such as the police, social care, education, health professionals, all that sort of people. They will then form, and then they will dig in every part of the child's life, such as education for school and stuff. But I don't think Lexi was at school, so that part wouldn't count. And then they would then look into it, and if they found anything that they were a bit worried about, they would then take it further and either visit the place of death or just try and form a picture of if this was suspicious and something sinister happened, or if this was just sadly something that happened and was unexplainable. Now, children do die unexpected without any reason, and that is horrendous, and I just couldn't imagine it. But with Lexi's post-mortem, there was no suspicious circumstances, and that said, no action was needed. But because of Scarlett's death, just 17 days after her sister's death, I guess this would have then created another alert to the SUDIC team, and they would have took a deeper dive into both cases. Further information was found by the police, and Louise was becoming more of a suspect for Louise's daughters, Scarlett and Lexi. And then on the 20th of March 2018, Louise was arrested on suspicion of murdering both daughters. But the police, they didn't really have anything to go on, and Louise was released the following day. Now, news started to spread on social media like it does, and due to the fact that she was acting strange and because she was arrested, her friends on Facebook, I believe it was, they started to become alarmed. Not all of them, but some of them started to sort of question Louise. Louise, on the 28th of March, she put up a Facebook post. I believe it was a profile picture. And she put a picture up of herself posing in this picture. And she put a couple of hashtags which said #smile and #fuck the haters. This was due to people questioning her behavior. Then on the 21st of June, Louise then posted another picture, but this time it was several bin bags of clothes, children's clothes. She posted to the selling page on Facebook, girls' clothes for sale, £20 altogether. And then she wrote like the ages of the clothes. And these were Scarlett's and Lexi's clothes she was selling for £20. On the 24th of November 2018, Louise then shared another picture on Facebook with the caption, "Mummy's angels taken too soon. You will never be forgotten. Rest in peace." And she shared a picture of Lexi and Scarlett. Now, on the 25th of January, moving forward 2019, the police finally had enough evidence to charge Louise with the murders of her daughters, Lexi and Scarlett. And they also went through her internet history, CCTV footage, and numerous authorities, and they just gathered enough information to be able to charge her with the murder of her daughters. Which then takes us to July the 3rd, 2019, which is actually the trial. At Birmingham Crown Court, Louise's trial began. Louise always denied the murder of 3-year-old Lexi and 17-month-old Scarlett. Louise's internet search was sinister. The paramedic that attended to help Lexi on the 4th of January, he stood up in trial and said that he had no idea why the child became ill. He said the child was lying flat on the back, and further tests were carried out, and the paramedic concluded that she was suffering from a severe respiratory illness and she was in critical condition. Then Lexi was taken to hospital. He says that Louise was upset, but she wasn't screaming and she wasn't crying. And then when she got into the ambulance, she wasn't distressed at all. While Lexi was in critical condition in hospital on the 4th, Louise's internet history shows that she looked up online, "Can you actually die if somebody blocks your nose and cover your mouth with tape?" She also searched, "How long after drowning can someone be resuscitated?" And she looked at an article of a toddler Can a toddler be brought back to life after nearly drowning? The court heard how Louise looked up all of these things. Louise told the court that she accepts that being a parent was not one of the easiest things to do. The court heard how she said that her daughters gave her something to do. She said, I would take them out places, I would take them to the park, and I would try to give them what they need. She insisted that she wasn't guilty for murdering her children. The jury then heard that on the 2nd of January, when Lexi was taken to hospital, Louise was texting a man and offering to perform sexual acts on him in return for cash up front. This is while Lexi was ill in hospital. The following day, Louise messaged her sister and said that Lexi had been ill and she had a fit and she wasn't very well. And that was it, basically. And then her sister said, well, have you called 111, the non-emergency phone line, and told them that Lexi is ill? Then on the 4th of January, when Lexi was taken into hospital again, Louise's internet search uncovered that she had been searching about children's health. And then she was also asking men for money online. Louise had sent numerous different texts to different people saying that her daughter had died for 20 minutes and she had to go to the hospital and stay there for a few days. She then said that in another text that she needed funds to help her get by. The same day, she would speak to a photographer who they would exchange 59 messages with on the 4th. Then on the 5th, they would continue to talk to each other until the 6th, where they would send a further 38 messages to each other. This was all while Lexi was in hospital. One message began with, she would perform sexual acts on him in return for money, and then she goes on to say that he could have her all day if he wanted and do whatever he wanted to her for £300. So on the 8th of January, Louise was offered a temporary accommodation for herself and her daughters from the housing officer. The housing officer spoke to her on the phone and said that she would meet her the following day to hand her the keys to this property. So the following day, Louise met her and she told the housing officer that she had no food for her children and she had no money and she needed a food stamp to be able to get food for the kids. The housing officer then asked why, basically, she didn't have any of this, and she said that her daughter had been in hospital. So naturally, the housing officer said, why, is everything okay? And she just said, yeah, Lexi was in hospital because she couldn't breathe. And the housing officer was taken back, and she was a bit shocked by how matter-of-fact and undetached she was to this information, because this was her daughter she was talking to. So on the 14th of January, Louise, like I said, was seen walking into the property with Lexi and Scarlett. And this was at 6 p.m. She was seen on CCTV. The courts also heard that while her daughter was in hospital being treated by medics, Louise was in the toilet sending topless photographs to men for money online. Then on the 15th of January, Lexi died and Louise accepted 41 friends requests on different dating apps from men the day after her daughter had passed away. And on the 19th of January, Dr. Philip Cox had carried out a post-mortem examination on Lexi Draper, and he gathered various samples and sent them off for testing. And it came back that there was not a natural cause of death, but at the same time, there was no suspicious death involved. Just a few days after Lexi had died, Louise went to the funeral parlour to arrange her daughter Lexi's funeral. And while she was there, instead of doing what any person would do, is try to get through arranging this funeral for their 3-year-old child, which would have been horrendous, Louise was taking phone calls and FaceTiming a man online, arranging to meet up with him for payment for her services. The jurors heard that following Scarlett's death, a home office pathologist and a paediatric pathologist, they both worked together to complete a postmortem on both Scarlett and Lexi. Following an extensive inquiries, which I guess was part of the Sudic team to perform specialist doctors to come together, no natural cause of death was found in either children. It was established that both children had died as a result of a deliberate airway obstruction. Scarlett had 2 small bruises on the left-hand side of her forehead, There was 4 areas of bruising, and some occurred prior to the death, so just basically the day before, and then some was like 3 or 4 days old. It's said that there was congestion to the lungs and there was a hemorrhage in the surface of the lungs. And Scarlett had signs of bleeding in the neck tissue and suggestion of a compression to the neck. The police also found a pillow with blood on it. There were spots of blood on it, and they believe that this was used as a murder weapon. The jury also heard that when the police seized Louise's phone, they also uncovered searches which include how long it took to a dead body to go cold up to the shoulders. Now, it is believed that after Lexi had passed away, that Scarlett was seen by a social worker, and the social worker did say that she saw Scarlett and she was looking chatty, alert, and happy. Louise had read up online in a news article on another occasion about a child who died from the flu. So on the 1st of February, the court heard how Louise had texted someone called Patrick asking for money, and she asked for it because she said that she needed fuel for her car. She said that she needed to get her daughter to the hospital, and she said that she would give it back to him on Wednesday when she had money. Louise go on to say that her daughter isn't well and she's not going to lose another baby. Patrick replies with, "Call an ambulance," and Louise then replies with, "I did, and they told me to make my own way there." On the same day, on the 1st of February, the day that Scarlett had passed away, Louise was seen on CCTV carrying her daughter, Scarlett, out of the hotel, which was her temporary accommodation, after telling emergency services that she would take her own daughter to hospital because she wasn't going to wait and lose another child. Louise then placed Scarlett in the back seat of her car. She then drove around in her car. She was seen on CCTV just driving around. She would then stop for fuel and put fuel in her car at the garage. CCTV then captured her at the cashier, paying for various different items, in no hurry whatsoever. She then drove off and finally ended up in the car park where she called for emergency services. Now, the whole time, Scarlett is to believe to have been dying on the back seat of her car, if not already dead. Now, this is because some sources say that Scarlett had already had the first stages of rigor mortis setting into her body, and the paramedics said that when they went to Scarlett in the car park, Scarlett's body was freezing to the touch. Scarlett was obviously then taken to the hospital where she was pronounced dead on arrival. A few days later, on a further meeting with the same housing officer who she first spoke to, while in the housing office, they were going to do everything they could for Louise because they knew that she had just lost 2 children in a matter of 17 days. So they were obviously going to help her as much as they possibly could. And they were trying to provide her with accommodation. Now, they said that they were so taken back with how no emotion was coming from Louise at all. She didn't look like someone who just had 2 children die within a matter of 17 days. She wasn't bothered, and her only concern was her accommodation, basically. So the housing officers said, "What do you want with the furniture that you had from your previous address?" And Louise was like, "I don't care." And she basically yawned as though this all bored her too much. She didn't show any emotion to him, and they were really shocked and kind of horrified to see Louise in this way. And obviously people do grieve differently, but this was different and they were shocked by this. The court also heard how previously Louise had left her children at home unattended, and this was to meet up with men to provide her services for money in return. Louise was also seen numerous times leaving her hotel room when she had Lexi and Scarlett, and they were in the room by themselves. She would leave them to meet a man a few doors down, and she would visit this man often, sometimes for like an hour at a time, and her children were left unattended. The court also heard that on a separate occasion when her daughter was in hospital, Louise passed her number on to a hotel security guard, and they would go on to exchange 87 messages while her daughter was in hospital. The court also heard how Louise would often leave her children with the landlord to who she used to rent a property with previously. The landlady said that she rented my property and she would leave her daughter with me up to 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes from an hour to up to all day and sometimes all throughout the evening. She said that she didn't mind looking after him because they were no trouble at all, but she fell out with Louise in the end because of Louise's behaviour. Then Louise's mum Sharon would take over and look after the children so Louise could go out shopping. Throughout the whole trial, it came very clear to everybody that Louise would send messages before, during, and after both of her children's deaths, asking for money off people, offering services in return. She would regularly use a website called Meet Me or Badoo, and the court also heard how Louise brought men back to the bedsit that she was staying at, and she would offer to give him sex in the same room as her children were sleeping, as long as they didn't make too much noise. It's believed that numerous people reported Louise to social services, but nothing was done. The court also heard that Lexi and Scarlett died because of deliberate interference with their breathing. Louise claimed that her daughters died naturally, but acted like she'd just lost a goldfish, it said. These were toddlers that died, and she just didn't care one bit. Louise repeatedly denied having anything to do with the death of her children. She said, "Why would I kill my own kids?" She then added, "My children were never an inconvenience to me. I accommodated my lifestyle and my personal life around my children." She said it is correct that as a single mum, it was financially difficult, but I never asked anyone for money, and the suggestion that I did and I used my daughter's death or illness to make money was wrong. She said during the trial that Louise continued to make out that she was a good mum and she never regretted having either Lexi or Scarlett. It is believed that Sharon, Louise's mum, said that Louise actually told her that after Lexi had died, that Scarlett would be next. She said it was threatening and she was planning on what she was going to do next. Sharon reported it to social services. Mrs. Justice Yip described Louise in court as evil. She said, evil and calculated. She goes on to tell her, she said, these were blameless young children who were plainly vulnerable and ought to be able to rely on their own mother's protection and nurture. You should have nurtured them. Instead, you took their young lives away. The judge added, one way or other, you squeezed the life out of your daughters, only calling for emergency services when you knew they were dead. She said, I am sure at the time of their deaths, you intended to kill each of your daughters. Why you did so, only you would know. So Louise tried to blame her unemotional feelings and the way she acted towards her daughter's deaths and things like that. She tried to say that she had some kind of mental illness or disorder. And the judge then said to her that I consider you very immature. And while there is no evidence of any mental disorder, it is plainly part of your makeup that you find it difficult to make and sustain emotional attachments and to put the needs of others in front of your own. And then on the 1st of August, 2019, Louise was found guilty of murdering 3-year-old Lexi Draper and 17-month-old Scarlett Bourne. And the following day, Louise would be sentenced. This was after a 5-week trial. The judge says, on each account, I sentence you to life imprisonment. Take in account of all the factors I have set out. The minimum term will be one of 32 years before you can have parole. Less than 188 days you have already spent on remand in custody following your arrest. Now, for me, when I was researching this case, the one thing was very apparent. Not only, obviously, Louise was never emotional about the fact that her daughters had died because she was the one that took their lives, but she didn't show any emotion at all through anything, not even a glimpse of sometimes when you sort of a reality of what you've done, nothing. She just didn't care at all. She was a selfish person who robbed her daughters of their lives, and they're never going to go to school. They're never going to make friends. They're never going to have that best friend that they tell everything with. They're never going to have their first job or get married or do anything they ever wanted to do because they were an inconvenience to her and they got in the way of her sex life. The attention that she craved from men and the money that she needed and craved for was far more important than her own daughters' lives. Why she didn't just give them up for to a family member or to social services or anyone, why did she just take their lives? Like the judge say, only she will know. It's horrendous. After Louise was sentenced, now Sharon, she said that she would never forgive her evil daughter, and she blasted social services as well for warning the string of warning signs that was put in front of them. Sharon said that something had snapped in her daughter's head and she became a monster. She said, "She's not the happy, loving girl that I brought up, and I no longer consider her my daughter." When Louise was young, Sharon worked a lot and she wasn't at home very often, she said. And other reasons were involved and she wasn't part of their lives as much as she wanted. She said that she wished now that she could talk to her and ask her what was going on in her head and to get a grip and stop acting this way. She said that this is all like a bad dream to her. "I loved seeing those kids," Sharon said. "I miss them kids so much. And I'm never going to be a part of their lives or see and watch them grow up." Sharon was heartbroken and devastated. There was a victim impact statement read out from Chris Draper, Scarlett and Lexi's dad. He was 25 years old at the time. "I am broken. I will never be the same person. I just keep asking myself, why did Louise do something so evil to my beautiful daughters? They were just an inconvenience to you. Why did she not just give them to me? Because Louise, I will never be able to hear their voices. Louise deprived me of my daughters. I will never meet Scarlett. That pain will live with me forever. I hate Louise. No punishment will ever be enough. I now have depression and anxiety. I constantly think about my girls. Since Lexi and Scarlett died, my mental health has declined. I have regular appointments with my GP and I am unable to go back to work. All of these things have made my day-to-day life difficult. We feel that the girls have been let down by the system. This could have been prevented. This is something I thought I would never have to write. The only comfort is that both Lexi and Scarlett are now together." After the case, Detective Superintendent Peter Hill said from Warwickshire Police, "I will never be able to understand why Louise Porton murdered her children. She lied repeatedly to friends, family and professionals, and at no point did she ever show any real emotion." We then move forward to Sunday the 2nd of February 2020. Sadly, this all became too much for Sharon to deal with. Louise's mum was tormented and upset by what her daughter had done. She just didn't understand it. She couldn't handle the fact that her daughter had murdered her 2 grandchildren, and she felt it too hard to live with the taunts and verbal abuse that people who knew gave her. And she ended up taking her own life, and her body was discovered in her home. My deepest sympathy go out to Sharon's family and for the loss of 3 lives because of one terrible person. Thank you so much for listening to today. I will release another episode in the following days. Much love, everyone, and please take care of yourself and each other. I will see you very soon. Love, Lindsay.